Welcome to Signal Radio. I'm Mark Johnson with Signal Architecture and Research, and Signal Radio is a series of conversations we have with our dear friends, project partners, collaborators, clients, to talk about where design is in the world and how it's more than the objects we make. We like to say that we design for people we will never meet 50, 100 years from now in one-of-a-kind projects. And today we're here with Ben Rankin, working on the Watershed Live-Work District. He's been a critical partner, key guide, collaborator, catalyst with so many people. And we'll talk today about the power of city making. And there's humility in it, there's courage, there's craft, and care. So Ben, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I'd love to kick us off with maybe a little bit about you. And when I look back at your work and how you've served people in places with many of the businesses and organizations and ventures, that people and environment seem to always come back to the work. And can you talk a little bit about where that came from, where you want to take it, how it's going now, and what you dream about with that lens?
I have increasingly found that I like to serve as a catalyst to things, and I feel drawn into serving as a strategist and organizer. And my work has been around affordability and historic preservation in real estate, ranging from 280 square foot backyard cottage renovations to 12th century chateaus to other things. And I've also done a good bit of industrial work, and that has mostly been focused on waste and energy reduction. So I've had kind of a real estate part of my career, and I've had an industrial part of my career, and that has mostly been about trying to find ways for heavy industry to operate more efficiently, not economically efficiently, but resource efficiently. And all of that actually came out of my third and most important area of sort of personal identity, which is the arts. I was an English major and then worked in the theater for a dozen years. I like to play the fiddle and write and do all kinds of other things in the arts and appreciate the work of others. And so that, I think, I find really informed, that sort of spirit of improvisation and creativity is often the joy in a project. And I think bringing that curiosity, which I think is the art mind that we all have, to a project helps make it fun and interesting and exciting. I mean, there's always a lot of sort of dry, repetitive, or anxiety-inducing components to any project that involves money and people and time and everything else. But I think that when there's this sort of sense of creative transformation, and that I think gets back to the catalyst notion, I think the arts are catalyzing events. So that catalysis, is that a word? Is the joy of it. But then once you launch something, there is a need to keep it going and figuring out the right balance between the fun stuff and the needed stuff, and also finding the satisfaction in the tactical creativity and not just the strategic creativity is, I find, an important part of my work. And I'm speaking really abstractly now, but currently most of my work is focused on affordable housing, and I find that there is a real delight in, for example, solving a financing challenge, or seeing a new way, in working with a collaborator like Signal, seeing a new way of thinking about a layer in a project.
Makes me think of an equation that maybe the cost sheets or prospectus sheets don't have, which might be money plus people times art equals experience. And it seems like experience is so much in that work that you're doing, whether it's in the doing or it's in the outcome. And that then creates value for the participants in the day-to-day, and then value in the outcome. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the things that you've been a part of, Watershed, that we're working on, we think about the value to the people who are here, the people who haven't been served, the people who need to be served, the people who are speaking up, and the people who don't know how to speak up. Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about those different values? I think of the art imperative as incredibly valuable, and folks may not know it yet. So could you talk about that a little bit, of value, of scales of value?
For me, so the art imperative specifically is the plan to include a commitment to include no fewer than 1,000 art interventions, a term that you helped me to, over the next X years, 12 years, 20 years. We're still figuring out what the right time scale for that is. In the live work district that we're developing in Georgetown. So the idea being that a wide variety of art activities and art installations can activate this small 5-block area, and some of it can be inside the buildings for the delight of the residents, and some of it can be out in the streets for the delight of everybody passing by, and some of it can be giant, 75 by 200 foot murals on entire facades of the building, and some of it can be tiny things hidden under a bench that somebody notices, having sat there 5 times, and then the 6th time they notice that there's a little diorama under the bench. So there's issues of scale, and there's issues of the ephemeral and the, if not permanent, at least long-term durable. So lots of thinking with you and others going into what constitutes that art imperative. But I think the value of a participatory community feels like one. The resilience that comes from a participatory community feels like one really important value that this imperative can do for us, which is the idea that both the people who are already part of the community that's doing this work and future members of the community need to have a part of this activity. So it's not posting art somewhere for people to appreciate, but rather creating an engine for art making that can go on forever, or go on until it stops, but hopefully long survive the 2 people in this room and many others. I can go on. It's making space. And it makes me think of Ioannis Xenakis. Do you know Xenakis, the composer? Mm-hmm. So avant-garde composer, everything from curating the instrumentation in the orchestra to the spaces that were played in. So everything, the space, all of it. One of his quotes was, the one instrument that the entire orchestra can play at the same time is silence. And that takes tremendous discipline of all the people in the orchestra, the conductor, the composer, to create the silence at the right place so that the pause becomes something. And that place that is rooted in art, that creates that opportunity from the diorama to the mural and everything that comes downstream, is that silence. Silence doesn't mean nothing. It's everything. And it creates that space. I have the privilege of having the skills and experience to be able to be as effective as I can be in this leadership role with, but there are other people who have other things to contribute. So not just like the servant leadership concept, but like really not being, like leaving space for others to lead, and trying to find the right balance between when do you step up and lead, and when do you leave space for others to lead, and how do you do that? Can it work to co-lead? Classically in arts organizations, do you have an executive director, or do you have a managing director and an artistic director, or do you have co-artistic directors? or you only have program directors and a board. There's so many different, and I'm just talking about organizational structure now, but I think that that applies in any ensemble experience. I've been, I played a little bit of violin all my life, or a lot when I was very small, and then a lot less over the years. But the last few years, I've really been enjoying learning jazz because I learned classical violin as a very small child. I started when I was 3, and I've always loved to improvise, and I've loved like that music welling out of you and you just play it. But I've never known any of the tradition around improvisation. And there's something really delightful about jazz, especially an ensemble which has patterns of, I'll say, music direction and leadership within the ensemble, but where there's also a tremendous amount of respect amongst the musicians, where the music director may not be the best soloist. And then maybe there's the young guy who's like the fabulous vocalist who can bring a whole new energy into this group of, older, like really solid musicians who are touring musicians and session musicians, but they know that there's like a new energy that's coming in, so they need to leave space for that to lead. But then you have the band leader who's like the heart and soul of the band, who's put it together, who's the one who invites people and who's sort of given the last solo and so forth. But then you've got the drummer who is so solid, and I mean solid at a level that not just drummer solid, but like, going to Jupiter solid. And you really need those different kinds of leadership going on simultaneously to have a really fabulous experience, both for the musicians who are delighting in one another because of this, dynamic, and for the audience. And I'm talking about, I went to an East Bay Soul concert the other night, which is a group of these great old musicians, many of whom have been around for a long time, in Tower of Power and Earth, Wind and Fire and whatever. And it was just a delightful concert because of the way that each soloist had the opportunity to really shine.
There's a power to being trusted. And trust is a big thing we talk about with projects. How do we build trust with a new client? How do we build trust with a community? How do we build trust with folks we'll never meet? Mm-hmm. And that idea of trust and being trusted, I think it's really at the heart of what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And are there ways that I think we as placemakers, thinkers, deal makers, mm-hmm. can create that trust or embody that trust mm-hmm. in our efforts? I won't call them projects, in our efforts, mm-hmm. that then will inevitably return.
Mm-hmm. That makes me think a couple of things. One is about the tension between the concept of the speed of trust and the exigencies of deploying large amounts of capital, much of which is debt, meaning time-bound. There's an inherent tension between, hey, we got to get this thing built because the clock is ticking, and hey, we got to bring everybody along. And the bringing everybody along, there's like a, hey, we want to do the right thing element, but it's also, for me, very much about, like, the longer we talk about it and the more people we talk to about it, the better it can become. And there's balances there, but in general, I find that more voices mean more resilience, more surprises, more joy. And so figuring out how to ask for trust and do the things that are necessary to establish trust early enough and fast enough that trust can build, but then not forcing it and trying to build into your project capital structure and everything else the ability to wait for people or to give people the time they need to be brought along. It's a really interesting balance and tension, and inevitably you have the people who are saying faster, faster, and the people who are saying more trust, and both are right and necessary. And I think and that's the art of community development, I think, as opposed to real estate development. Real estate development often is trustless, trust-free. It's just, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go do it. Oh, we need to make some gestures toward mailing out notices to people in the neighborhood. So we're going to do that.
Enlist people to agree.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like community informed rather than community advised. Yeah.
Right.
Engaged.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Finding what has happened before is a big part of what can happen next. And with planning, so many times the plan is, okay, what are we going to do now? And if we base the now on what happened, good, bad, or otherwise, then we have a direction. And sometimes you need to go a completely different direction. If that different direction is informed by something, then it's that much more grounded in where it starts.
And then first you need to commit to that and be open to it and trust that what you find, even if it's not what you want to find, will contribute to what you're doing. And keep going backwards while you're going, keep digging while you go forwards. I have a little example, if I may, around naming the Live Work District. Watershed has these 3 programs, Equinox Studios, finding ways to engage with other community organizations and support them and be supported by them, and then developing this Live Work District, which we are calling the Bend. And that comes from a few different places. One, of course, is the Oxbow that was filled in, the Lost Bend. So that's looking back to history. And of course, we've worked a lot on this notion of the meander, the meandering pedestrian path through the middle of the Live Work District that goes through the buildings, down the alleys, across crosswalks, through another building, etc. And that's sort of hearkening back to how the river meandered before it was straightened, the Duwamish River. And so Bring Back the Bend is bringing back a little bit less straight and narrow, get the trucks down the street, which is important, but we also want a more meandering opportunity and part of that meander is looking into the past as well as the future, is thinking about the residents as well as the businesses, is thinking about the role of nature in the environment and how, especially in this particular neighborhood, it's really been erased in a lot of places. So Bring Back the Bend. Also, a catalyst for that name is that we've discovered, and we did not know this, but we've discovered that there was an affordable housing project that was built in 1942 called Duwamish Bend that was built 2 blocks from where we're sitting right now, between Equinox Studios, this complex of buildings, and the Live Work District, by Seattle Housing Authority. Affordable housing built on a kind of an emergency basis, like we need housing, initially for military workers, people at Boeing and so forth in this area, but then it stayed after the war for some period of time because it turned out it wasn't just emergency housing. It was like, wow, okay, there are all these people who need affordable places to live in Seattle. And there's not, back in 1945, that was true. So there, and a library and a daycare and like all these resources were a part of this complex, and it got built and then boom, it got knocked down. So Bring Back the Bend.
Ben, this has been a blast. We could keep going all day, I'm sure.
Yes, we could.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It means so much to me, for you to, first off, to work with you and bring a project into being that does not exist anywhere else. And then to have this conversation and to continue this conversation is a gift.
And it's my pleasure, and I'm really glad that you're doing this podcast, and I'm excited about learning from the other people that you're talking to.
Thanks, Ben.